I asked Tim Good if he thought the flying saucer shape, often observed, could be explained by the physics of rotating superconductors.
Well, the problem there is that there are plenty of craft which aren't of the classic flying saucer shape, but certainly I think that that could well apply. I've got in my book Alien Base cases going back to the 1920s, encounters with beings, with flying craft, and they talk about rotating materials inside the craft which nullify the effects of gravity.
Right. I do look now at the common types of shape. I look at high multiples. I look at...
When you say that, do you mean more than one UFO in the
sky?
Yeah.
Well, two types. There's two types of multiples. One multiple officer and two high multiples of UFOs seen at the time. Over the entire 7 reports, broadly speaking, what is fascinating for me and has always been the lead statistic is that approximately 70 to 75% of cases on the database are multiple officer witness. So it's not the lone officer who's mistaken at 3 in the morning, he's tired and whatever. That was the perception perhaps before that the skeptics might use. My statistics and data seems to prove totally the opposite, that 3/4 are in fact multiple officer cases.
Another characteristic of UFOs is their ability to make themselves invisible. This was demonstrated at Edwards Air Force Base to President Eisenhower in 1954.
Edwards Air Force Base, which was then top secret for top secret aircraft, there was a meeting arranged in February 1954. I don't know any more. I do know some things that happened as a consequence of that, but there was a meeting with Eisenhower and some top officials, including the American head of the Catholic Church, Cardinal McIntyre, I think, and a few other high-ranking people, named who they have been named in one famous letter, which I published in Alien Liaison. I think it definitely did happen. My information was that there was a follow-up arrangement to transfer technology. This was given to me by another source, and a meeting, I don't know if Eisenhower was involved at this particular meeting, but I know that some scientists went out to a certain desert location and were taken out by some CIA guys.
And it's alleged that they demonstrated that their ship could become invisible.
Yes. Apparently to Eisenhower's tremendous embarrassment. And he said that, they said they wanted to educate Earth people. They were very concerned about the nuclear build-up and everything, and Eisenhower was quite shocked by this, and he said, I don't think we're ready for that yet. And in the end, apparently they agreed, and they said, well, we're not going to stop being around, you know. And
welcome back. Many of the larger UFO craft are described as huge black triangles. It's rumoured that the US military have developed their own top-secret flying triangle called the TR-3B. The craft is nuclear-powered, totally silent, and uses an anti-gravity conducting ring. The ring surrounds a rotatable crew compartment and is filled with plasma. The device is known as a magnetic field disruptor. The plasma is mercury-based and pressurized to 250,000 atmosphere at a temperature of minus 123 degrees centigrade, then accelerated through the ring at up to 50,000 RPM to create a superconductive plasma which results in anti-gravity disruption. The magnetic field disruptor generates a magnetic vortex field which disrupts or neutralizes the effects of gravity on mass within proximity by 89%. This means that if you stood in the middle, you would suddenly weigh 1/10 of your actual weight. We heard from Tim Good that not all craft are flying saucer-shaped. Often, huge craft have been sighted in various shapes, some described as bigger than a football pitch. 2 famous cases of such craft were witnessed at Phoenix in 1997 and Stevensville, Texas in 2008. There have been many recorded cases where multiple smaller UFOs, including the flying saucer type, have been seen flying around and about the larger craft. The large craft are presumably motherships and are sometimes called cities in the sky. During the Travis Walton abduction case, Walton was taken on board one of these massive craft and witnessed different types of flying saucer parked up within the interior, almost like a flying aircraft carrier. Detective Constable Gary Heseltine.
There's one of my favourite cases on the entire database, and is a case that came to me directly from an officer. Was from a former Thames Valley police officer called Eric Raymond. He was a PC, and he'd served in another force prior, but it was in an area, I think in the sort of Long Crendon area, and basically he was in a rural area with two other officers. There were two police vehicles parked up, having a chat, cigarette, as they did, and this is 1978. Suddenly in the distance, a long way off, they see a light low to the ground, but it was so quick that they really couldn't make out what it was, and they didn't think too much about it. Suddenly, and there is no other lighting around, they see an object that doesn't arrive in the conventional sense of coming in left or right or from the air. It suddenly appears, which is again a characteristic that I do believe genuine UFOs have the ability to make themselves invisible, for want of a better word, turn it on and off. They're often seen to blink on and blink off. I think that's a characteristic. And this case bears this out, because there they are chatting away, rural location, suddenly blink, and there is an object a quarter of a mile away, so a few hundred metres away, no other ambient lighting, and this object they describe as the size of a football field, shining a beam down to the ground from an altitude of about 500 feet, the width of a football field, and it is slowly scanning the terrain, the countryside terrain. There are smaller objects flying around the large object. It's in total silence. They're absolutely gobsmacked. They try onto the radio, fails. They watch this object for 5 minutes,
Which
and then
is another characteristic.
yeah, and then it just blinks out and gone.
It's not easy using conventional physics to explain how they managed to make these huge craft invisible, but it is clear that their technology is able to control and manipulate the fabric of nature in a far more advanced way than ours. They are able to render nuclear missiles and aircraft missile launching systems useless from miles away. They have also been known to use some kind of beam-type technology to levitate large objects up into their craft. As well as being able to appear and disappear seemingly at will, there have been many cases where UFOs have caused our own craft to disappear.
Absolutely. They have the capability of just absorbing aircraft, spacecraft, whatever, on board their giant carriers.
Okay.
Another case that came last year following an appearance on Look North, regional BBC Look North in my area, Yorkshire. Two officers approached me. One case related to an area of Bristol called the Lullsgate area, and there was a small airport that was closed, and in 1966 two officers were in a patrol car, and they're driving along sort of with the runway on their right, and there is a pub and a few little houses, street lamps, very quiet, airport closed. Suddenly, as they're driving past, their car headlights dim, cut out, and the engine cuts out. Suddenly, again, similar characteristic, blinks on. They see what they describe as an oval-shaped object, white, 100 yards wide, hovering above the police car for approximately from a distance of about 200 metres away, altitude 500 feet. They watch it in total silence for 10 seconds, and then suddenly gone.
Yeah.
Now, there is absolutely, it's an almost identical case to the Eric Raymond one. You know, in isolation, the skeptics will say these people are just imagining it. But when you get that sort of confirmation, years apart, totally unrelated people who have no connection to each other, then there has to be something going on.
The Roswell UFO crash of 1947 is well documented. In 1948, the American military recovered another flying saucer. This time it was completely intact.
Yes, this took place in Aztec, New Mexico in March of 1948, when a 100-foot diameter disc actually came down in a sort of controlled crash landing. The only damage was to one of the portholes, which looked as if it was either an entry hole from a shell from the military, which is quite possible. I'm convinced that craft was almost certainly shot down, and it was in perfect condition. There were at least a dozen small bodies inside, but they had been, or appeared to have been, burnt. There was no fire involved, but because apparently the atmosphere just simply wasn't right for them, and this has been confirmed by a number of sources.